Guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about your posterior chain. So when I'm thinking about posterior chain, obviously it's the back half of your physique, but I'm today talking about, hey, hamstrings, kind of glutes, erector spinae, versus anything else. Obviously you've got the back of your calves, you've got your upper back, your lats, rear delts, all this sort of musculature on the back. But today we're mostly going to be talking about those muscles and how this exercise variant that I'm going to be talking about, for me, is absolutely a must-do. And first of all, we're going to have a look at my physique before I really started prioritizing this. And I was 175 pounds here. Now, I think my posterior chain actually here doesn't look as bad as what it actually was in real life. It doesn't look too bad. It's not something that's been an inherent weakness on my physique, but it's certainly come a long way since this period of time. And as I was kind of coming up to this point, I focused a lot on deadlifting. And I mean heavy deadlifting off the floor. And this was my prime, probably like posterior chain movement. And so I think that did me lots of good, but I don't know if it was the best choice to bring up my posterior chain. You can also look at how I'm executing. I have a kind of conventional deadlift and I have a sumo deadlift here, actually from a deficit, which probably makes it slightly better maybe. It increases the range of motion there. But you can see how I'm executing it is very much like powerlifting focused. And what I mean by that is it's moving A to B. The eccentric, no eccentric, I'm just letting gravity do the work. And that's really letting down the deadlift. And it's one of the reasons I think a lot of people don't get the growth out of a conventional or sumo deadlift off the floor that they expect to, because they're just approaching it like a powerlifter would and going from A to B. And so I think another reason, so you could improve it by having slower controlled eccentrics for sure. And I think it can actually be a pretty decent lift. But I think it has the downside of also including knee flexion and therefore including more of the quads. And so you're hitting lots of muscle groups. And if you were to say maybe one lift and you could only do this lift and nothing else to grow yourself as much as possible, maybe the deadlift would be there because it's hitting lots of muscles fairly well, but it's not hitting anything super well. So you could say, hey, I could do this and then accessories to kind of finish off muscle groups. But I think from someone who is more advanced, getting more well-trained, the conventional deadlift, if anyone has done, a deadlift off the floor, it wrecks you, right? Especially because it tends to be better for the like lower rep ranges, which just systemically seems to really fatigue people. Joint niggles, stuff like this too. And so I don't think it's the best lift. I think a better lift, and after kind of this physique that you saw at 175 pounds, I transitioned to this other lift, which is the hip hinge. Or rather like a straight leg deadlift and RDL, whatever you kind of want to call it, where you're emphasizing hips back and not knee flexion, so no forward knee travel. And you're doing a better job here of isolating fewer muscle groups. And this is where you are looking to hit the glutes really well, the hamstrings incredibly well. The erectors are going to get a pretty good stimulus from this too. And by keeping the hips back and up, and allowing, obviously you're coming down pretty low, you can even come to a deficit, which you're going to see me doing too. You get some really, really cool aspects from this. You get more muscle lengthening, you get more range of motion, just in general on the glutes and the hamstrings, they go through a larger range of motion. And it's also a range of motion where they're getting more stretched. And it really does seem to appear that kind of longer muscle lengths and taking a muscle to a longer length is particularly hypertrophic. And you also exclude the quads, so you're getting a better specific stimulus to the hamstrings and the glutes. It also means you're using less load than what you would on a conventional or off-the-floor deadlift. And so the kind of systemic fatigue, the neurological, neuromuscular fatigue that it generates is less as well, which generally just improves your stimulus to fatigue trade-off, because especially like for bodybuilding, it does seem to be pretty clear. The literature is supporting like, hey, the more you can recover from is probably going to lead to more growth. So if you're generating like really good, better stimulus for certain muscles and less overall fatigue, it means you could probably do more of it. And that stimulus to fatigue ratio is in a better place, you're going to be growing more. So I really think most people will be better suited who really want to maximize growth, dropping deadlifting off the floor and moving more towards this kind of hip hinge, the straight leg deadlift, the RDL, potentially good mornings if you find that to be a lift that is particularly good for you. I just think it's a better overall trade-off. So you can see how I started kind of doing this. Not particularly impressive amounts of loads. And also, and by the way, this was during like a peak week where I was trying to deplete. So I don't even know if I was trying to get particularly close to failure, but it just was nothing impressive. I didn't look anything impressive. Obviously, I was pretty lean at the time too. And my technique just also wasn't particularly impressive. Like I didn't have a huge range of motion or anything like this. Not bad. It was perfectly fine. But I do think also over time, you can get to a position where you have more control over the lift, where you might be able to get even more range of motion. And that's something I found now in future. I've been able to come, and you'll see me lifting at a deficit. So I'm raised off the floor and I'm bringing the bar all the way down to the floor, keeping my hips high and back. And I'm just getting an extra range of motion there. And I'm using much heavier loads than I used to in the past, which is pretty damn cool. And that's just leading to growth, right? It's progressive overload. Some of my favorite cues for getting the most out of this lift are the following. So I like I've said, hips high and back. A cue that I got from Jared Feather is like butthole to where the wall meets the ceiling. And you think just like up and back, because they're being held up there, because as soon as they drop, then you're getting more slack in the hamstrings. And that also could lead to shifting knees a little bit more forward. Now, if you just wanted to kind of hit the glutes more and forget about the hamstrings a little bit, cool, you're slacking the hamstrings, you're still keeping a lot of length on the glutes by having them back. But I like keeping them up and back, particularly because I really want to prioritize hamstrings here. Then think soft knees, so you don't need them locked out. A lot of people think like, I think there's like a straight leg deadlift. I think that's a little bit different probably to like a straight leg deadlift. That's what it's called. What am I thinking? Straight leg deadlift, stiff legged. Anyway, I think that's the one. But you want soft knees. I think it's a kind of a misnomer that like if you just stood tall and like push your hips back, it's just not going to work super well. So soft knees. And some people might say my knees are a bit too bent. It's just what feels best to me personally. I'm not a very mobile individual, so I don't know if that plays into it or anything, but this is what feels best to me, and so I would just have a feel with that. And the key thing is my hips are up and back. Like that's what's happening. And so that's what I'm focusing on versus, hey, what are my knees necessarily doing? So soft knees, so you don't want them perfectly straight, but you also don't want to kind of bend too much, because excessive bend, again, is going to lead to your hips dropping down. And it's also probably going to lead to knees tracking forward, which you want to avoid. So you think, if anything, soft knees, knees back and out. That's a cue that I don't think many people think about, is knees out. And that just often opens up a little bit more room for you to kind of sit back into it. Or even sit down into it a little bit. It just ends up allowing you to get a bit more of a stretch. So I really like that cue. You want to think about your back, specifically your lower back, to either be arched to just flat. And as soon as you feel like that position is going, as you're kind of moving through the lift, that's when you want to kind of be like, hey, I'm calling full range of motion, because if you get into like lower back rounding, it's just that as you come up, your back is just going to be fighting to kind of come back into a kind of neutral flat position. And so it's probably going to just generate more tension through your lower back and erectors, whereas we're really primarily trying to hit the glutes and the hamstrings here. So I kind of think that's a good place to be. Then we don't want to retract the scapula. A lot of people think like, oh, they have to retract up here, and that's going to cause your upper back and like whatever's retracting your scapula here to be the limiting factor versus the muscles we're trying to hit, because they're inherently going to be a lot weaker. So you want to have like a nice upper back that's braced, and I think a high chest also helps keep the back into a really good position, but you don't want to retract unnecessarily here. Then you want to keep the bar nice and close to your body. You don't want to kind of let it drift and lean forward to get this range of motion. And I think for most people, a 3 to 4 second eccentric works best. What I think that allows you to do is not only it really ensures you're controlling the lift, but it also allows you to really make sure you're maintaining tension where you want it to be. On some lifts, you don't need that long of an eccentric, because it's really easy to maintain position, maintain the tension where you want it. But for this one, it's so easy to let the knees just come forward. It's so easy to let the hips just drop down. It's so easy to lose your back positioning, that I think that slower eccentric just allows you to also potentially eke out a little bit more range of motion, because if you're nice and slow through it, you can kind of like just open up a bit more, stretch a bit more, keep that position. And it allows you to really maximize that nice range of motion, versus if you kind of go quickly, and I was going a bit quick in my first video, you just kind of go to a point and you come back up. Whereas if you just slowly like move through it, you'll find you get more range of motion, you keep the tension where you want it. And I find that to be really, really helpful. So now you're getting a relatively recent physique update where I'm 190 pounds. So I'm a good 20 pounds heavier than I was previously. And I mean, just so much more muscle mass here for similar levels of condition, to be honest, which is kind of mind-blowing in many ways. And of course, that was all the way back in 2017. This is now 2023, of course. So 6 years. So you'd hope that I'd gained a lot of muscle mass in that period of time. So yeah, if you found this useful, definitely let me know. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, always comment below, let me know. If you aren't subscribed to the channel already, please do make sure to subscribe. And as always, as a reminder, we are online coaches here at Revive Stronger. We review training footage on a daily basis because we want to make sure our clients are maximizing their technique and their effort in the gym and making sure they're also getting everything they should out of it. And we also help, of course, programming, exercise selection, everything through exercise selection, kind of sets, reps, the microcycle, mesocycle, macrocycle plan. These are things that we're helping our clients with and communicating with them so all their efforts are paying off and they can be very confident about that. So if you're interested in online coaching, that's always linked in the description as well. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one.